A report is coming from Iran, and it says that either Israel or the U.S. struck the Natanz enrichment facility.
An important nuclear site in Iran was hit again. The target is Natanz, one of the most important uranium sites in the country, located about 150 miles south of Tehran. Within 3 weeks, it was bombed twice by the U.S., using heavy bombs capable of penetrating underground. But this time, the impact was deeper. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video. It really helps our content. Creator, thank you very much, and now let's get started. On the morning of March 21, 2026, the facility was hit again. The tunnel entrances collapsed, the air passages were blocked, and the access roads were destroyed. Underground, about 50 meters deep and surrounded by thick concrete, there was a section that was completely isolated. Inside, enriched uranium was stored. It's also possible that there were people trapped inside. As time passed, the air supply decreased, the surroundings became hotter, and there was no way to communicate with the outside. And even if you wanted to help them, it was almost impossible, because any attempt to open the entrance again could be detected and targeted immediately, because the U.S. was still on standby for any movement. The operation used the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, a plane that's hard to detect by radar. It flew from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and traveled for almost 18 hours before reaching Iran. According to Israeli media, bunker buster bombs were used in the attack. Israel had already struck Natanz during the first week of Operation Epic Fury. Their targets were the 3 underground sections of the facility using their own powerful bombs, possibly GBU-72 or GBU-28. After this, the U.S. followed and hit the main area where the centrifuges are installed. 2 GBU-57 bombs were used, large bombs that can penetrate the ground before exploding. In other words, it wasn't just a single attack that happened. This was a joint attack by Israel and the U.S. that hit the most important parts of the facility. Israel went first and weakened the structure. The U.S. followed, delivering a stronger blow. On March 3, 2026, the Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that there was significant damage to the buildings at the entrance of Natanz. Because of this, the road leading underground was cut off. The core of the facility itself wasn't totally destroyed yet, but it could no longer be easily accessed. By March 21, the U.S. returned using the same type of bomb, but this time they hit a different target. It wasn't just the entrances anymore, but deeper parts of the complex. This was already the 5th major attack on Natanz. To understand how big this is, you need to see what the place looks like. The main facility is 40 to 50 meters underground. Underground, it's surrounded by thick concrete for protection. Inside, there are huge halls that can hold up to 50,000 centrifuges. Above ground, there are 2 large buildings that reach almost 2,500 meters. There are also offices that can accommodate around 1,000 people, but it doesn't end there. There's another part that's even more mysterious. About a mile to the south, there's another site, the Pickaxe Mountain facility. Inside the Zagros Mountains, a newer part of the complex was built. It was carved into the mountain and reaches up to 100 meters deep. There are reports that the most sensitive part was moved as deep as 800 meters underground. This is even deeper than some well-known underground facilities. Now the question is, can large bombs reach that depth? No. But that's not the objective either. What gets hit are the entryways and the air vents. These are the most important parts for the entire facility to function. If these are destroyed, what's inside can't be used even if the structure is still intact. This is where the situation becomes critical. If the entrances collapse, it's no longer clear what or who is left inside. The underground areas of Natanz were not designed for long-term habitation. They need a continuous supply of electricity, water for cooling, clean air and chemicals for operation. Because the centrifuges spin at extremely high speeds, they generate intense heat. If these support systems fail, the operation won't just stop. The inside of the facility will also become dangerous. If the heat isn't removed, the shape of the centrifuge rotors changes, and the entire system gets damaged. If the air vents are also damaged, like what the U.S. targeted in Fordo back in June 2020, it's possible that temperature control inside was lost. And there's an even bigger question. How many people were left inside? Since the facility can hold up to 1,000 people, it's likely there were people on duty at the time of the attack. They may have been trapped inside an underground area where the exits are now sealed. On top of that, there's the danger from UF6 gas. When this gas mixes with moisture, it turns into hydrofluoric acid. It's a chemical that can be deadly in an enclosed space within just a few hours. No electricity, no air, no light, and no communication. At a depth of 40 to 50 meters, no natural air comes in. And because the entrances and connection lines are damaged, it's almost impossible to communicate with the outside. In this situation, a rescue operation from the outside is almost impossible. The collapsed entrances need to be cleared first. But in the middle of the war, this is dangerous because the U.S. is still on standby and could attack again if they see any movement. Iran says there is no radiation leak, and this was also confirmed by the Atomic Energy Agency. But that information has its limitations. The Atomic Energy Agency has no direct access because the entrances are closed. Their data only comes from remote measurements, not from the actual conditions inside. There's another sensitive issue that isn't being talked about much: the presence of Russian personnel. At the Bushehr nuclear power plant, there are thousands of experts working. According to Rosatom, the total staff is around 3,000, and about 700 of them are Russian citizens. On March 3, as a precaution, the reactor was shut down. Some people were evacuated, about 150 individuals, but hundreds still remained inside the facility. Now there's a question. Are there Russian personnel in Natanz? There's no clear answer, and sometimes this kind of silence means something. We know that Iran has long had connections with foreign experts. Since the 1990s, it has received technical support from Russia and China. Some Russian companies provided equipment and expertise, while some centrifuge designs have been linked to the network from Pakistan. Russia also built the Bushehr nuclear plant. In 2025, Rosatom even signed a major contract for a new project in Iran. With this background, it's hard to say that there is no connection to Natanz, but on the other hand, there is also no clear evidence to prove it. It remains a question. It's not confirmed, but it can't be denied either. Russia's reaction after the attack was also noticeable. Their foreign ministry called it a violation of international law. Putin also sent a message to Iran saying that Moscow is a loyal friend and reliable partner. Strong words. But that's as far as it goes. No concrete action has followed. Russia also has no clear steps to help Iran in the fight. No offer of air defense systems, and no direct support in the war. There's a reason for this. Even though Russia opposes bombing Iran, it also doesn't want Iran to become a nuclear power. This could be a threat to its own interests in the region. That's why Moscow acts this way. The words are strong, but there's no concrete action. Meanwhile, according to satellite images and analysis, the damage on the surface is extensive. There are reports that Iran has 27 underground bases hidden inside mountains, with a total of 107 tunnel entrances. Of these, the U.S. and Israel have already hit a large portion. Many of the passages have been damaged or completely sealed off. This means that a lot of equipment and munitions were left underground. But that's not where the story ends. According to the report, Iran's response was quick. Within almost 48 hours after an attack, they are able to create a new entrance to restore access inside. This shows how deep and advanced Iran's underground engineering is. Every time an entrance is destroyed, they can build a new one in just about 48 hours. The U.S. will attack, Iran will dig again, and access will be restored. This cycle repeats and becomes an expensive and slow part of the war. But Israel is trying to change this. There are signs that their ability to see what's underground is improving. In recent strikes, it's clear that they can now detect signals like heat, movement, and vibrations, even if they're hidden inside a mountain. This means that hiding underground is no longer that safe. It also means that bunkers are easier to destroy. But once you can see the target, it's much easier to plan how to attack it. Along with this, a new concern is emerging. There are reports that the media has gained access to some of Iran's underground missile facilities. This raises questions about how they saw it, whether it was allowed or if there was another reason. It's still unclear whether this is an intelligence success or if Iran intentionally showed it. But one thing is certain: the tunnel network is vast and complex. For example, at the Kazma mountain facility south of Natanz, there are 2 pairs of tunnel entrances, one on the east, one on the west. These were further reinforced with thick concrete and extra spaces after the June 2025 conflict. There are also satellite images showing activity inside, such as vehicles coming out after an attack. This means that even if hit, the system still has the capability to recover and operate. There are indications that Iran may have moved its most important materials, such as enriched uranium, to deeper facilities before the attacks. It's also important to understand what Natanz really is. It's not a nuclear reactor. It's an enrichment facility. There's a big difference. This means it's not like Chernobyl or Fukushima, which have the risk of a major nuclear meltdown. It doesn't have a reactor core that could cause a chain reaction. But that doesn't mean there's no danger. The risk is just different. First, there's the risk of a UF6 gas leak. Uranium hexafluoride is used in centrifuges and is extremely dangerous. When it mixes with moisture, it becomes hydrofluoric acid. This is a chemical that can cause severe damage to the body. If there's a leak from a damaged line or centrifuge, it can quickly cause harm. It's especially dangerous in a closed underground area. Second, there's a possibility of low-level radiation. Uranium dust from damaged equipment can spread. But usually this is limited to a specific area and isn't as widespread as the effects of a reactor accident. Third, and less visibly but no less dangerously, is the long-term impact on the environment. If there are materials left inside the damaged facility, there's a possibility that they could gradually reach the water in the Natanz is close to agricultural areas. If the water is affected, it could have long-term effects on the environment and on the people nearby. This is not a sudden disaster. This is more dangerous in another way. The effects are slow but continuous. In terms of regional impact, Natanz will not be like Chernobyl. But that doesn't mean neighboring countries have no concerns. The Gulf states and Iraq are worried because of the loss of control in some of Iran's nuclear facilities. Because of this, radiation monitoring systems in the region have triggered alerts. The Atomic Energy Agency's call for caution to avoid a more serious incident shows how serious the situation is. For now, the IAEA says there is no expected major radiation impact, but their information is limited. Their access has been restricted for a long time. It's been several months. That's why they can't verify the exact amount, especially of the low and high enriched uranium. In other words, there's no clear picture of where these materials are now and how much there is. And this is where the situation becomes more complicated. There are analysts who say that there are possible different scenarios depending on where the materials ended up. There are reports that Iran has stored part of the enriched uranium from the Isfahan tunnel complex in containers that are easy to transport. At the same time, in June 2025, the U.S. struck the entrances of the tunnels in Isfahan using Tomahawk missiles. But until now, it's still unclear what happened to the materials inside. The same thing may have happened in Natanz. The entrances were destroyed, but there are reports that hundreds of kilos of uranium enriched up to 60% may have been left inside. For many years, one of Iran's strongest deterrents has been its nuclear capability. The message is clear. If pushed, they can make a nuclear weapon. But now, the very infrastructure that supports that capability is gradually being destroyed. As a result, the Natanz facility itself may already be destroyed or no longer easily accessible. The centrifuges have been destroyed. The entrances have been closed. The ventilation shafts have also been sealed. And until now, no one is sure about the situation inside the mountain. But there is one important thing that must be understood. The nuclear program is not just a building. It's not just machines or an underground facility. The real nuclear program is knowledge. It's the science of how to separate uranium. It's the skills needed to make the critical parts. It's the process of how to assemble thousands of components to work as a system. And this knowledge cannot be destroyed by a bomb. It's in the minds of the scientists. It's in the minds of the engineers. As long as they are alive and as long as knowledge is passed on in universities and research centers, there will always be the capability to start again. Machines can be destroyed in a matter of minutes, but knowledge cannot. And in reality, it's faster to replace equipment than to erase knowledge. Right now, underground, about 40 to 50 meters deep, there are facilities where the entrances are already sealed. The airflow has been cut off. It's possible that the cooling system is no longer working, and inside there are hundreds of kilos of enriched uranium remaining. It's unclear if there are people left inside. It's also not confirmed if there are foreign experts, such as Russians, in these facilities. But because there are hundreds of Russian personnel at other nuclear sites in Iran, it's also not easy to say that they're not here. Meanwhile, it's possible for the U.S. to repeat the attack a sixth, seventh, or even more times at every level. The physical parts of the facility get more damaged, but there's a bigger question. No matter how deep or powerful the bomb is, can it really completely destroy the entire system? Because if the target is buildings and machines, those can be destroyed. But if the target is the knowledge and skills inside people's minds, that's a different story. And the answer to this question will determine the future of Iran's nuclear program and how the situation in the entire Middle East will change. And this is where another important point comes in, one that isn't immediately obvious. It's not just about what was destroyed, but how long it will take before it can be restored to its original state. Even with Iran's knowledge, it doesn't mean recovery will be quick. Making centrifuges is not that simple. It requires the right materials, precise measurements, and a careful process. If there's a mistake, even a small one, the whole system might not work. Aside from that, you also need a proper place for these to work. You can't just put them anywhere. The environment needs to be controlled, the temperature should be right, and there must be a continuous supply of electricity. If these are not present, it will be difficult for them to run the entire operation. This is where you can see the effects of the attacks. It's not just the machines that were damaged, but also the very place where they are supposed to operate. So even if the knowledge is still intact, if the equipment is lacking and the facility is not in good condition, things won't return to normal right away. In situations like this, time becomes important. As time goes by, the pressure intensifies. It's not just coming from outside, but also from within the country. While the capability has not yet been restored, it becomes harder to show that the situation is still under control. At the same time, other countries are also watching. While Iran is trying to recover, others are assessing how strong they still are. It all depends on what they see. Their decisions may change. There is another effect that is not immediately obvious. When situations like this happen, the trust of the people in other countries is affected. Even if there hasn't been a major accident yet, there is already concern. And when there is fear, people and economies start behaving differently. For example, oil prices may rise, businesses may become more cautious, and the relationships between countries may become more tense. This means that even if the situation hasn't worsened yet, its effects are already being felt. There's another important thing. The battle doesn't just happen on land and underground. There's also a battle over information. It's important what people know and how they understand it. If one side can show that they still have control of the situation, others will react differently. But if it turns out that they are getting weaker, other countries might change their actions. In this way, the situation becomes more complicated. This is no longer just a battle of weapons or technology. It has also become a battle of time, information, and how others perceive it. For now, many things are still unclear. The true situation inside Natanz is still uncertain. It is also unknown how much capability Iran has left and what will happen next. But one thing is clear. The situation is not over yet, and as time goes by, every decision becomes more important. Because at this point, Even a small move can have a big impact. And if this escalates, it won't just affect one country, but the entire region and possibly even the whole world. There's another thing that needs attention in this kind of situation. While underground facilities are being damaged, this also affects daily activities above ground. It's not immediately obvious, but it's gradually being felt. When there's this level of tension, people become more cautious. There are places people avoid, trips that are no longer taken, and activities that are postponed for now. Even if they're not directly affected, the changes are still felt. Over time, work and business are also affected. Some projects are put on hold. Some companies are waiting before making decisions. And some investors are becoming more cautious. It's not because there's a direct problem, but because they're not sure what will happen next. In this way, the effects gradually spread from one place to a wider part of the region. There's another aspect that we should look at. When critical facilities are damaged, they need to be monitored. You can't just leave places with remaining materials or equipment unattended. There needs to be security, monitoring, and continuous checking of the condition of the place. This means that even if it's no longer used in operations, there is still effort to make sure that no bigger problems will arise. And this requires time, people, and resources. In this situation, attention is divided. Some are focused on repairs, some are focused on security, and some are focused on planning the next steps. When these happen simultaneously, running the system becomes more complicated. There's another effect that's not immediately visible. As the facilities are damaged, the mindset of the people involved in the program may also change. They become more cautious, quieter, and choose not to show their full capabilities. It's not because they lost their abilities, but because they don't want to be targeted again. In this situation, the strategy changes. It's no longer just about showing strength, but about being more careful with their actions. And when this happens, it becomes harder for the enemy to know what the next move will be. But there's also a trade-off. When things get too quiet, it becomes harder to show that there's still control over the situation. And when the moves aren't clear, more questions arise. As time goes by, these questions become part of a bigger conversation. It's not just about what's been broken, but about what's left. It's not just about what happened, but about what could happen. And at this point, every small detail becomes even more important. Even a simple movement, even a small piece of information, can have a big impact on how others see things. Right now, the situation feels like it's in between. It's not over yet, but it's also not the same as before. Some things are already broken, some things are still unclear, and some things are just waiting for what will happen next. And while things are like this, each side continues to adjust. Some are observing, some are thinking, and some are waiting for the right time to act. Because in this kind of situation, it's not just strength that's in short supply. What's more important is who is more careful, who can adjust faster, and who can wait longer. What's happening now isn't just about one facility or one country. This is part of a bigger change in how situations like this are being handled. Another angle should be considered in this situation. While everyone is focused on the damaged facilities, there's a quiet change happening in the way countries are taking precautions. Monitoring is becoming more serious. There are more checks, and reactions to even the smallest changes are faster. This isn't just for Iran, but for the entire region. If something unexpected happens, even if it's small, countries want to be ready right away. That's why every move is made more carefully, and every decision is thought through more. Along with this, communication between countries becomes even more important. Even with tension, clear communication is still needed to avoid bigger problems. In this way, it's not just the situation that's being monitored, but also its possible effects on a wider level. And as this setup continues, it becomes clearer that the fight is not just about what can be destroyed, but about how to prevent something worse from happening.